everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, and you're watching TechStrong TV. Thanks so much for joining us. Today is Monday, June 1st. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope everyone's well and healthy. And welcome to TechStrong TV. If you've watched TechStrong TV before, you know it. We spend the next 2.5, sometimes 3 hours on interviews with thought leaders and new tech news makers around DevOps and cybersecurity, cloud native, digital transformation, and more. I do a bunch of the interviews. Our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, does a bunch as well. And then we also have a steady flow of commentary and interviews from Mitch Ashley, CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group. And then we have a rotating cast of guest interviewees and contributors, including the one and only John Willis. John does his own interviews, and then the DevOps Cafe podcast with Damon Edwards and John. And then we also have people like Mike Vizard, who runs the Channel Roundup Happy Hour, doing channel news for us. We have Jane Grohl, CEO of DevOps Institute, talking about the humans of DevOps. And Jane is a regular contributor. And we Gigamon Security podcast. We feature a lot of different content providers here. Just a quick reminder, everyone. Today's Monday, the 1st. The 4th, this Thursday, is TechStrong Con. And this is the biggest virtual event we've ever done at Media Ops. We have something like 50 speakers. It's an amazing lineup of speakers. Some really big thought leaders. I helped record my friend Emmett Keefe from Insight Ventures back on Friday. And, Emmett speaks to about 10 thought leaders or different tech executives a day, especially during these COVID times, and kind of gathering up, what projects are going forward, which ones are on hold, what are the priorities, and he gave. Don't miss his presentation if you can't catch it live, because his presentation is going to be one of the first ones on Thursday. It starts, I think, at 1300 GMT. If you can't catch it live, do catch it on demand, because, if you want to know, what is going forward in IT, what is being cut back in IT. Emmett has some amazing information there and some great insights. But that's only one of 50 speakers. We have William Hurley talking about quantum computing. We have Liz Rice from CNCF and Aquasec. Andrew Clay Schaefer, John Willis, and a few of the other Red Hat folks. We've got people like Brian Dawson from CloudBees. Baruch Sigersky from JFrog. We have Mitchell Ashley and Sanjeev Sharma from Accelerated Strategies Group. Cornelia Davis, Shannon Leitz. Just rock star people. Chenzi Wang. There's a DevSecOps security track. There's an emerging technology track. There's a digital transformation track and a tools spotlight track. So go to techstrongcon.com. Register now. Also, we're giving away Xboxes and iPads and drones and Apple AirPod Pro and Bose wireless headphones and all kinds of great stuff for people who come. So go check out TechStrongCon. If you're on LinkedIn, go check out hashtag TechStrongCon and the TechStrongCon LinkedIn challenge. You'll help us, because a part of the proceeds are going to be going to COVID charities. And the more people who take the challenge, the more we give to the charities. So please go check that out. Next up, though, we have a full day for you here on TechStrong TV. And let me tell you what we got in store. Number one, I'm really happy to have my friend Greg Keller. Greg is the CTO at JumpCloud. JumpCloud actually was founded by a longtime, business partner. I've had the pleasure of founding and working with him on several companies. My friend Rajat Bhargava, my friend Larry Middle, who's another founder at JumpCloud. Greg Keller, CTO. It's a company I've been involved with. They actually were instrumental in helping me launch Media Ops. And so Greg gives us the update on JumpCloud, and what they're seeing during these kind of choppy waters, and how directory as a service is helping over 100,000 organizations right now kind of escape the server closet as part of their cloud transformation and improving security. So Greg gives us a good bunch of information there from JumpCloud. After that, I'm really happy. This is the first time I've interviewed this gentleman for TechStrong TV. It's Dr. Gregory Melnick, and he's from Tricentis. He's their chief product officer. But I've been involved with entrepreneurs and startups for about 25, 30 years now. And the one thing that you can't fake is passion. I think that goes for more than just startups. It goes in life in general. But if you have passion about what you're doing and what your roles are and what your job is, there's nothing like it. It's contagious. And you marry passion to intelligence, and you got something. And that's what you got with Dr. Melnick. I mean, he's just an advocate for the testing professional, and I do mean professional, not someone who thinks that testing is a way station on the way to being a developer or something else. We're going to talk to Grigori about how he's managing the product team at Tricentis while everyone is remote. We're going to talk to him about testing in a remote environment, just generally the state of testing and testing professionals in general. Don't miss that interview. I enjoyed interviewing him because I appreciate the passion. Then next up, after Grigori, we have Charlie Rosen. Again, cyber armor. And Charlie's another passionate person about security and the mission that Cyber Armor has on data protection. And he's going to tell us all about it. We haven't really covered Cyber Armor a lot, so this is a good chance for you to get to know what they're doing over there. After Charlie, we're going to go back in our archives for something old. We're going to go back to RSA conference where we were live on Broadcast Alley, and I had a chance to meet up with Ofer Israeli of Elusive Networks. Elusive is one of the leaders in the deception technology space. If you haven't heard of that, most of my cyber friends out here probably have, but go check it out. Listen to what Ofer has to tell you. He's a real leader in that space, and I think you'll enjoy listening to him. I'll be back after that with the news, and then we're going to head things over to Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene has Darren Murph, head of remote at GitLab. Darren is also speaking at TechStrong Con. Darren literally wrote the book on working remote, and that was before there was a COVID. If you know anything about the GitLab story, they have like 1,200 employees and 1,200 offices. There is no real office. Everyone works from home, and that is their real office. So good conversation with Darren, with Charlene. And then after that, we'll head things over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell Ashley has kick off our week with a quick flash poll and some great insight. And then it's Monday, and we're lucky to have Mike Vizard on our channel roundup for today. And Mike will give us some insight into how channel is going. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. So it sounds like a great action-packed TechStrong TV day. I hope you'll enjoy it, and we'll see you soon. We're just going to take a quick commercial break, and I'll be right back with our first guest.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, Tech Strong. Featuring John Bacha-Galupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
Back here in the studio, as I mentioned, our first guest today is Greg Keller, CTO of JumpCloud. JumpCloud was founded by two of the founders are two very old, good friends of mine. Not that they're old, but we've been friends a very long time. Rajat Bhargava and I first met in 1997. He was just graduating MIT, had started a company called NetGenesis. Rajat and I, Raj co-founded a company at the time was Sage Networks, became Interliant. I helped Raj as we did 30 acquisitions in 36 months, did the whole IPO thing, rode the whole dot-com bubble up and back down. Raj then started another company called Quova, which I had helped early on. And then I helped him co-found a company called Still Secure, which was born out of something called Lattice Networks. And Raj and I had a great time at Still Secure for about 9 years. While there, we brought in someone named Larry Middle, and Larry and Raj have worked together ever since as well, and I still remain friends with Larry too. So Larry and Raj co-founded JumpCloud Directory as a Service. Greg Keller came on shortly afterwards at JumpCloud, and I've known him since he joined. He's now CTO at JumpCloud. JumpCloud's now helping over 100,000 organizations with their Directory as a Service offering, and they've been seeing some interesting things, obviously, during these COVID-influenced times. So let's hear what Greg has to say on what's happening with JumpCloud.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everyone. All right, our next guest for this segment is my friend Greg Keller. Greg's the CTO at JumpCloud. And Greg, welcome to TechStrong TV, man. How are you?
Mr. Schimmel, it's good to be in your virtual presence yet again.
Everything is virtual today, my friend. You know, it's crazy times. It's crazy times. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But, you know, Greg, we talk fairly often, and I speak with the rest of the JumpCloud team. I think our audience is somewhat familiar with JumpCloud. Of course, you guys are the premier sponsors, founding sponsor for the IT as Code section on DevOps.com. But I don't know if people really kind of get how wide a base of organizations are using JumpCloud now, right, for directory as a service and IAM type of functionality.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I often look at the wonderful sort of collection of logos that you win when you win deals, and you look across them and there's no real pattern. That we've got traditional old school manufacturing and bleeding edge, born in the cloud, new school sort of technology companies, and everywhere in between. And at one point, we had literally all of the ride hailing services, i.e. Uber and Grab, they're customers of ours. And then at one point, all of the plated food companies, those that would deliver food to your door. It was very funny, like the patterns and the way our product got sort of communicated through the channels was all done through word of mouth.
Right.
As you know, the company was built on a product-led growth strategy. Quite literally, we've never made an outbound sales call to sell our product. It's all been done through highly progressive, internet-based means, almost sort of borderline the way a company building consumer products would go to market. But to answer your other question, what is it like for the non-initiated to this product or company called JumpCloud? We thank you for saying the word. We built what we call a directory as a service. The whole hypothesis that the team and I had when we launched the business in product in September 2014 was to build a highly progressive, I'll call it an all-in-one access control and device management platform. So what does that mean? You take a world of a directory, the thing that companies use that is their central source of authentication and authorization. An employee needs to get access to something, they type in their password, it could be their computer, it could be a cloud-based app, it could be a printer on premise. It goes somewhere, it goes to a directory, right? And that's the criticality of that. But where does all that transaction initiate from? A device, typically a Windows or a MacBook, and sometimes Linux machines. So we put a lot of emphasis on taking these two worlds, device management and a directory or identity management, and merge them into one contiguous platform for secure authentication from a device to anything an employee needs from anywhere. Fast forward from 2014, nothing's changed. We've never changed the hypothesis or even the product plan of, we've never really been forced to deviate. The product market fit was well understood by companies who didn't necessarily want to buy IT stuff from Microsoft anymore, right? So frankly, fast forward to 2019, now 2020, and the reality of COVID, which is horrible, has really forced many companies, many call them more traditional companies with a longer pedigree or sort of utilization of Microsoft IT services, namely Active Directory. And what has become glaringly apparent has been the sort of brittleness of when you're dispatched to work from home and you can't walk physically into the domain, your brick and mortar office, and then let Microsoft do its wonderful work, and you're forced to work from home, stuff breaks. And this has been a forcing function for many customers now ingressing or otherwise coming into our product line to help them get cloud focused, get cloud enabled, and really truly work remotely with no gap in security over an employee's access to resources. And that's the short history of this whole thing.
Absolutely. But Greg, you know what you left out from the first part? Which is, yes, you've been through a lot of the rides and a lot of the plate deliveries, a lot of old school, new school, excuse me. But when we put it all together, there's something like 100,000, almost 100,000, maybe over 100,000 organizations worldwide that are using JumpCloud, right? And that's a critical mess. That's
non-trivial. We've eclipsed the 100,000 active organization mark. The cool part about what we did was, you all know what freemium is. We inverted the freemium model. What does that mean? In normal circumstances, a freemium means you're a company who gives a little bit away of the product. Here's a little taste, right? And you would like to buy, this more advanced feature, pay me. We decided not to do that. We decided to give away the platform in its totality with every function. So all of its super power user features are all included in the quote free version of this product. The only thing we did was just cap it in terms of number of users, number of employees that you could authenticate. What this did, Alan, was to think of it as seeding the market rapidly. Companies that knew security but otherwise couldn't afford it, they're brand new startups, they're under 10 people, they're trying to get their best foot forward, and every penny counts towards building their own service. This is, again, I built a few startups. Raj, our CEO and founder, is an 8 or 9. We have a huge heart and empathy for startups. Thus, we gave this thing away. We want those companies to have their very best foot forward first in terms of security. From the day they open their doors and put up a shingle on their now virtual offices, you shouldn't sacrifice security. And that was the whole premise. And guess what? It worked.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about freemium, Greg, you're kind of talking about the open core model, right? Where there's an open core set of functionality that is free and open source or what have you. And then the good stuff, often costs money. And you guys you didn't do and then there are a lot of open source purists who actually have a real problem with the open core model, because open is open. You can't have, some open, some not. And but you guys didn't follow an open core model. What you actually followed was a free forever model up to a certain amount of users. In days gone by, we used to see this sometimes with database, right? Like MySQL.
Yep.
Right, was an open source database, but depending how many CPUs you used, and now, of course, think back, Greg, we used to measure that. How could you measure CPUs today, right? But, back then, that was a good measurement. The other thing, though, you mentioned is that, yes, no one wants to sacrifice security. And look, I was there when you and Raj and Larry and the guys, when JumpCloud became JumpCloud, right? One of the founding sponsors, even on our DevOps.com site, right, at MediaOps.
I remember it clearly.
But it wasn't, though the mission was always security, I think the mission has grown now where it's certainly more than security, right?
Yeah, yes. if you choose to categorize it in that way, all roads lead towards a secure method for an employee to gain access to resources. I mean, that's what this mission is about.
Yep.
And what we had to do was expand the idea a bit, and really where that bubble, where the expansion came from over the last, let's say, roughly 2 years, was a dedicated focus on devices. So let me contrast this. Most folks, when you're thinking about an authentication mechanism, a directory or a SSO, solution, they're all kind of these point-based things. We kind of, first of all, said, screw it. All of those authentication mechanisms are features of our directory: Radius, LDAP, SAML. Like they're not categories. The directory is this thing called the category, and then those authentication schemes sort of give you pathways into it. But again, the bubble, Alan, was, and when I say bubble, like where we put a lot of our intellectual property chips, right, was the transaction of a machine. Like, Alan, you fire up your Windows machine or your laptop that, let's assume, is owned and managed by JumpCloud. If you work for a company that uses JumpCloud, the moment you log into that machine, JumpCloud is already behind the scenes doing its work. It's scanning the machine. It understands your user account. It probably instituted multi-factor authentication to get into that box because you're obviously the CEO, privileged person. It set the encryption on that machine. It blanketed it with policies to protect it so that all of those things, when it generates, call it a security posture, we know Alan is going to be safe when he starts to access things, either in the corporate network or up in the cloud, right? So that was the big, you talk about, it's all security, but yes, we sort of expanded and opened the aperture up, differentiating us from a lot of the clone security sort of authentication companies that were out there. The device matters in its relationship to access of resources.
Absolutely. But I think the other thing that's changed, you casually mentioned whether it's up there in the cloud or here on premises, or maybe it's in this cloud and that cloud, and that cloud too, and this whole thing is the kinds of things we access, the number of things we access, the places where we access them from, not only where they're located, but where we're located, whether it be at home on your child's machine or at the beach when we used to be able to go to a beach, or on a plane or stuff like that. Right? That world has JumpCloud's got to be about 7, 8 years old? 8, 9 years old, maybe.
We launched the product launched directory as a service September 24th, 2014. Yes, I do remember the date. We spent about a year prior tooling the platform into, actually, that's
right, because we launched March of 2014, Greg.
That's right.
Right, and you guys were just getting it together then. That's what I remember. But even in and it seems like it was yesterday, you're right. But even in this short, it's almost 7 years now.
Yep.
Right?
It's incredible.
Yeah, six plus years. Even in that time frame, think about how much different the kinds of things we're accessing are today. You mentioned casually, food delivery and car rides. That was there then. But think about all that we access today and why you need a JumpCloud-like functionality, right? Not even talking about people being trapped at home in COVID and that what that load puts on us. But, the mission has expanded in terms of, why back then there was a good discussion to be made about, well, why can't I just use AD? Right?
That's
today,
correct. Let me give you a little lens. So in the last decade, actually we'll call it 12 years, because almost 7 of it was spent here at JumpCloud. All my companies look, from an IT and compute perspective, very similarly. We were building something in AWS. all of my workforce were on MacBooks. They were easy to buy, easy to set up, all that kind of stuff. We typically would buy or rent in certain circumstances, Cisco equipment. And Google was how we collaborated. So we had, G Suite. So when I give you that composite of like what are, call it the IT resources of what
the stack. This is the stack you used.
I didn't say the word Microsoft once. So the reality, for my companies, and frankly now the service that we're building for our customers, these are companies that very much look like us. These are companies who were born 3 to 5 years ago. They're younger than JumpCloud, yet they're 200 million in funding, and they're on their path to it, or have already eclipsed unicorn status. And they're 2,000 employees, and they look and feel and smell and taste just like us from a stack perspective. And these are companies, who, number one, they've never had on staff a Microsoft MCSC or a domain admin. They're not, most of, like when you look at the profile of the sysadmins, the folks that are sort of hands-on with the IT problem of these companies, they're like former DevOps engineers, they're integrators. They definitely can write REST, so they can write, code to hit REST APIs. They're not like your granddaddy's sysadmins. So they have no desire to work on the Microsoft stack, right? They're trying to figure out how to get engineering teams' Lenovo laptops with Ubuntu on it under control. Who does that, right? If you're all homogenous and it's all this sort of sweet lather of, Microsoft stack, right? You're using Windows computers and you have, Office 365, and of course, go use Microsoft. It's incredible, right? Go use that. But tens upon tens of thousands of companies, some that are being born every day, aren't computing like that. So there's us. We're an alternative. And that's really the philosophy.
There are no former DevOps engineers, though, right? Because DevOps engineers don't die; they just fade away.
They just fade away.
But no, you're right, and that's exactly the point I was trying to elicit from you in terms of how the world's changed. And look, I'm not here to bash Microsoft, and I don't think you are either. They've responded, and you do have AD in the cloud and stuff, and it does. If you have a very Microsoft-centric office, no pun intended, right? And you can get away with just using that, fine.
That's right.
I think one of the lessons, though, we're seeing, especially, and I'll bring it back to the COVID thing, Greg, is that with people working from home, right, and they're not going through necessarily VPNs and back to the mothership.
Yep.
And if they are, it's probably a kind of a backwards way of doing it, and they need to access different things that aren't in that Microsoft sphere of influence, as we used to say in poli-sci back in college, right? And so you can't have one that rules them all, if you will, and you need this type of flexibility to work with. Them on. And you mentioned Mac, you mentioned the Google the Google suite. I mean, even here at MediaOps, we're small, we're 20, 25 people now, but we have a mix. We have people on Macs, we have people on Windows, we have people who use Office, everyone gets G Suite with their mail. So we have people who it's a mishmash. And so
you said the key thing, or actually I'm going to say the word for you, choice. You give your employees compute choice. And that's the way it should be. We are definitely not Microsoft haters. They're a first-class citizen in terms of what they're a resource that we can bind to our core service. And it could be a Windows machine, a Windows server up in any cloud or on-premise. It could be Office 365. And statistically, you'll find this interesting. 80% of our customer base uses a mix of both Office 365 and Google. Sounds weird, doesn't it? But it's
No, that's us. That's us. You described me.
yeah.
I use Outlook on a Mac,
Yep.
but I also have G Suite installed and my full Office suite, and depending who I'm collaborating with, I'll use both. We could talk about it offline, but I see an interesting mix, Greg. My oldest son is going into his senior year of college. Now, he is an Office kid, Office guy, right? Because he learned Office, I guess, in high school or whatever. My younger son, senior in high school going into college, he's strictly a G Suite guy. Because somewhere in between there, somewhere, the schools started switching
Yep.
from Microsoft to G Suite. And so when you look at these, this class of 2020 that we all are talking about, you see them as cloud natives, right? And they use it was an interest. I was talking about it with John Willis the other day because his sons are the same exact age, same exact usage pattern.
That's right. Yeah, Google is definitely, starting to quote own edu, and it's pretty interesting. I think the most notable thing you said is just the short time period, 4 years.
Oh, yeah, 3-4 years.
It's a huge tide change.
Well, that's why I say 7 years in Jump Cloud, but look at what's changed in that time. Anyway, speaking of time, Greg, we're out of it. I wanted to talk more about what's going on with COVID and Jump Cloud, but maybe we can have you back on in the next week or so if you got some time, and we'll continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Just as an aside, our team is safe, healthy, and 100% remote.
Well, that's good because you guys aren't necessarily remote. I've been to your offices, and I know that.
Is now empty for the time being.
Same here. I just got some new artwork for our office. I'm the only one who sees it. But it's okay. Anyway, hey, Greg, it's great seeing you. Keep up the great work at Jump Cloud. We'll have you back on soon and continue this conversation.
Cheers, my friend. Be well, Alan.
All righty. Hey, Greg Keller, CTO Jump Cloud here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
As I mentioned in the beginning of the show, there are some things in life you can't fake, and one of them is passion. Well, some people may tell you differently, but I can't. But, genuine passion is, if it was a drug, it would be the best drug in the world. It's contagious. And my next guest here is passionate, and he's passionate about testing. He's passionate about testing as a profession. He's passionate about delivering the best testing platform to testing professionals possible. He's Dr. Grigory Melnik. He's a chief product officer at Tricentis. He has a long, distinguished career prior to joining Tricentis, with some of the largest organizations in the world in academia, professional organizations, etc. But anyway, we caught up with Dr. Melnik and had a good talk about the testing profession, about how working remote is affecting testing, what may be the lasting repercussions of this, and how he's managing his own product team at Tricentis. He's chief product officer during these trying times as everyone's remote. And the good news is, Grigory has a smile on his face and is making lemonade out of those lemons. So, he considers it an opportunity. And as I said, his passion is contagious. So now let's go to Dr. Grigory Melnik of Tricentis.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone. Okay, our next segment on TechStrong TV today features Grigory Melnik of Tricentis. Hey Grigory, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, good to be here.
Nice to have you here. Hello. I see you got a little Einstein poster there in the background.
Yes, I do.
We can't make out the quotes.
Yeah, absolutely. So somebody who inspires me and I guess many other people a lot. But the quote, actually, this is from my students at the times when I was in academia. They actually gave me this poster that says, "If you think you have difficulties with mathematics, I can assure you that mine are still greater." So this is just kind of an inspirational way of my team members who sometimes would come in with their struggles or issues and think that the sky is falling because there is an escalation or something like that. And I was like, don't worry about it. Everything can be resolved with a little bit of diligence and thinking and just
putting your mind to it.
Gratitude. Everything can be handled. So
Absolutely.
Just like the COVID crisis that the world's been into.
Let's hope so.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
All right, Grigory. So you're presently with Tricentis, though. Why don't you give our folks a little background? What do you do at Tricentis?
So my role is a chief product officer. So essentially, I run all of product research, design, product management, engineering, user experience, pretty much end to end. Everything that the entire pipeline, the entire factory, if you may call it that way, of building, releasing, shipping, and software, and improving the lives of our users, testers all over the world. And Tricentis is the leading continuous testing platform that has this portfolio, this suite of tools that enable you, regardless of your style, regardless of what school of thought or what preference or necessity for automation you come from. It gives you the right set of tools that can be fitting into your life cycle to help you drive your testing efforts, your quality efforts much more efficiently.
Excellent. And you're right, Tricentis is a market leader in this whole continuous testing space, which is such an integral piece of this whole DevOps kind of mindset of how we deliver, develop and deliver software. You can't go fast without having continuous automated testing. Otherwise, I mean, it's like hitting a wall, right? If you think you're going to do manual. And we could talk about it on another day, but I've spoken to some people recently who they say, they're still surprised by how many organizations are still doing a lot of their testing manually. And it's really come out with this COVID thing, right? Because now it's one thing when you're in a group and you're doing manual testings all in the office and we're moving and I give it to you. You go remote, everybody's on their own island kind of thing a bit. And man, if you're waiting for someone else, the whole manual testing thing just becomes a nightmare. And so I think as a result of what we've been through with COVID, we'll see more companies, I think, trying to say, hey, what can we do to automate here? What can we do to speed this along? What can we do to move to a continuous testing footing, right? But I'm interested. What are you seeing? What are you guys seeing at Tricentis around this?
So just to be clear, when it comes to testing as a craft, as the discipline, okay, we don't believe that you can automate 100%.
Never.
That it will never happen. Just like this vision of several decades or now, it's kind of coming again with the AI-driven development where the software writes software. Yeah, it's nice to demo. It's nice to go and read about it in sci-fi or have some movies, but it's not going to happen. Human insight, human intelligence, human thinking is required. So testing is a highly intellectual activity. That's something that I want to emphasize and for people to appreciate. Now, there's a lot of different actions or activities within testing role that you could use tooling and get yourself a leg up because you're able to automate and you're able to get some of the mundane tasks of check-in and regression testing and all of that automated. And of course, this is where we provide the plethora of different tools and capabilities of everything that the machines can do better. Everything from just, again, regression testing to when you actually need to launch your testing at highest scale against 10,000 of different nodes in a distributed fashion, and either do it as part of your distributed test execution just to make sure that the tests run faster, and as a result your pipeline and getting through your build and everything, you end up going faster and able to do the continuous release on the daily basis, hourly, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Or even from the perspective of things like performance and load testing, right? Just doing it by yourself, human, without the help of the tooling, without the help of the infrastructure that is capable of doing all this provisioning, self-installation, self-healing if needed, and capturing the data and making sure that basically all of this extra work that is not part of testing, but it is more of like prepping and execution is taken care of. And you can, as a tester, you can focus on things like setting the targets, setting the goals, think about the hypotheses, think about your oracles, think about what are you pursuing here, what kind of insight are you trying to gain, what kind of insight are you trying to provide to people who you are working with. That's where the role of a tester gets elevated from, again, mere check-in manually and then go and click, and that's it, right? To a much, much, much more thoughtful experience.
Grigory, you should be an advocate for the profession of testing. I mean, that's probably one of the best descriptions of what the job is, what the mission is, and how we address these things that I've heard in 25 years, right? I mean, that was beautiful.
It's interesting because it used to be, I don't think it is the case anymore, but it used to be when testing was regarded as kind of an activity that you get into if you can't get a job of a developer. Remember that notion of the whole day?
There was that notion. Right.
It's actually a very short-sighted view. We recently, I mean, not only, I take a philosophical disagreement with that position, but we have recently launched probably the largest open source testing survey with several thousand, I think 7,000 respondents around the world. And when we were looking at the demographics, what was amazing is that we've actually now had some hard data showing that many of the respondents had been in the testing career for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, which basically reiterates the whole point that this is not a launch pad for some other developer career. This is not an interim phase where you are learning the ropes. This is actually something that you need to be passionate for, and you actually need to be good at. That's the other thing. Going and breaking software and looking for bugs, it's actually not something that you just do on the whim. That requires skills, that requires forethought, that requires training, that requires your own, kind of keeping your saws sharpened all the time. So again, and we're, with our position of Tricentis being the tooling company to enable the testers and the test teams to go faster, we just want to kind of make them shine even more. So we're not talking about replacing the testers of the world. We're just making sure that they can be a lot more effective in what they do.
So someone smarter than me once put it to me this way around this whole issue. If we could automate what makes sense to automate, and it probably goes beyond testing, if we could automate what makes sense to automate, it allows us to free our minds, to use your Einstein quote there. It allows us to free our minds to do things that shouldn't be automated, that do require our skills, our intuition, our mind, right? So when you automate the mundane, right, the kinds of things that should be automated, you free up to go do these kinds of tests that only a human mind and a skilled human mind, right, a trained human mind is going to do that. And that goes beyond just testing, frankly, right? That goes into a lot of, when we talk about AI and all of these things and what could be, or people give you these doomsday things, I'll replace humanity and all that. That's, I think, the golden rule here. Automate what can be automated. Use machine learning and stuff and AI for what makes sense to. But there's always going to be things we have to do, right? But we got off track.
Let's come back to what's doing with COVID.
What are you seeing? How is this? Everybody working from home remotely on their island, though they're not really on the island. The other thing we have found is, what? The internet works. We're here on Zoom, right?
Believe it, yes. It's probably the best.
Every damn day it works.
It's the best stress test that you can imagine, right?
Yeah, this was.
And I know some infrastructure, some ancient telcos are not coping with it quite well. But where I am, it seems to be working quite well, and for most of my team members, it's quite fine. So I'll just tell you, for us, largely, it has been, business as usual because, first of all, most of my team distributed already. And you'll notice, by the way, I'm choosing the words carefully. I prefer the term distributed rather than remote, because with remote, it always feels like there is almost like this us versus them, local versus remote, and remote is somewhat of a lesser importance, right? I actually don't believe in that. It's like the team is distributed and you have some people here, some people over here, some people collocated, others are not. But the reality is that, yes, we at Tricentis, we had the dedicated R&D dev centers around the world. Like there was a big one, there's still one in Vienna, there's another one in Atlanta, another one in Sydney, another one in Vietnam. But the reality is that all of the products have been developed by the teams that were where you had somebody being remote regardless. So we were kind of used to this, mode of operation. But, having everybody being, connected through video conferencing and having nobody being collocated, that was new. Now, one of the things that we actually realized is that by far and large, it for us has been business, almost like business as usual in terms of, development. Because again, we had all the tooling, all the processes, all the automation for the pipelines, and somebody was saying, "Hey, now that the people are not in the team room, are we losing some of the productivity?" Well, we actually didn't. And the way I know it is because our engineering leaders, I know you can take the metric with a grain of salt, but they looked at something as like the pace or the number of daily commits by teams, by individuals, and on average that hasn't come down at all. So we were actually seeing teams performing quite well even in this in these times. Of course, what we had to do was to do a little bit extra enablement and helping people upgrade their home offices, because there are some people who haven't used from home for so long that they didn't have a second monitor, for example, right? Or they didn't have a super comfy chair or standing desk or something like that. So we went, extra effort to make sure that we can accommodate it. But that's again,
where'd you find extra monitors?
Where did we find extra?
We've been looking for extra monitors, cameras for the, for your laptop or your desktop, so you can do Zoom, better cameras. The problem was you couldn't find even green screen, the backgrounds to use in a Zoom. Well, Zoom did virtual backup, so people did.
Interesting. The extra monitors wasn't the problem. The biggest one that got on the back order were the desks.
Really?
Because suddenly everybody wanted to do the standing desk, and that's where people had to wait for it for longer. But monitors were apparently not a problem. Maybe because there's probably a greater supply and a lot of different options, and also because of different countries, there are different supply channels. So it's not everything that has to go through Amazon or through CDW or whatever. So, but anyway, so we had to do that just on the site. And then the biggest change was really around the processes of amplifying communications and truly over communicating. So the three things that I want to say that were truly part of our success during these times is communication, speed, and the stability in terms of how we're building, what we're delivering. And a lot of it already came from the practices and processes that we had in place. But on the over-communication side, and I think everybody's probably mentioned that, we had to do something, a little extra. We had to introduce, weekly, for example, town halls with the executive staff. I had to go and add a little bit more frequent team meetings and demos and stuff like that. So teams had to come up with some creative ways of staying together, even while being distributed. So we had things like virtual office hours and virtual drinks and virtual birthday parties.
Oh, a lot of people
virtual
have
celebrations.
Yeah. No doubt about it. The virtual happy hour, we did similar here, Grigori. We have a daily stand-up meeting, where we didn't necessarily do that daily before, and a very similar thing. And it's good to see that an organization the size of Tricentis has coped with it. I'd like, if we can, I want to turn now, so not looking inward just at Tricentis, but let's look at the testing community at large, right? We were talking off camera and we started getting into it. While everyone, I think that what you described is there was always people who were remote or distributed, but there was like some core that worked at a center together. And one of the things we're seeing is, certain tasks lend themselves well to a 100% remote workforce. Certain tasks, have some struggles, some challenges in a 100% remote environment. Some people thought that testing might be one of those areas that have some challenges in a 100% remote environment. What are you hearing from the Tricentis customer base, from the testing community? What are some of the challenges we're seeing in working totally remote like this?
Well, in terms of challenges, if you think about some of the testing activities or spikes or sprints or whole testing sessions that were conducted in a paired fashion or group fashion, when it wasn't just a single tester going through it, but there were several people, with one person driving the exercise, another one observing. That's a little bit more challenging, but at the same time, you can do these days all the screen shares and multiple cursors, and there's all this software that exists that allows you to go and point on screen and annotate and do all of that. So it's all resolvable. I would actually say that we've seen, an advantage in terms of doing some of the pilots and proof of concepts, where in the past there were certain enterprises that were more kind of closed off, and they were operating in the air gap scenario, where the only way for us to go in and to do a POC was to actually have our pre-sales engineers, professional services come in on site and then do it with the engineers in that environment. Now, because of the reality of the world, that was no longer possible. So they actually had to open up, and it actually made it a lot easier for us to actually engage with those customers who were not as accessible before, right? In terms of the testing itself, in terms of going and probing and launching software and operating on it, and again, performing all of this and capturing and automating, the reality is that our tool chain is so powerful. And again, I don't want to kind of toot my own horn, but it's something that's been recognized for years, since we're truly in this leadership position. But it's so powerful that you can do testing against any kind of system. It doesn't matter if it's a legacy one, maybe running something like, IBM 360 mainframe, but still through the terminal window. Or you may be running some other legacy system, SAP, or some system that was never meant to be accessible remotely, right? But now we have all these protocols that allow you to do the remote execution, right? Whether it's RDP, whether it's Citrix, whether it's something else. And our tooling can actually drive tests, across those systems through these protocols, because we build the engines that are actually capable of communicating with systems through these protocols remotely. So it's actually been pretty normal for us to be able to do that. But for many people, this was something more of a discovery and a better appreciation for the testing tooling. And then plus, again, the aspect where you can now go and distribute and not be a single-threaded testing where you have a tester launching some kind of a automated test manual on a single machine, but having it execute where you spread it across multiple nodes through the distributed execution. That was something that was a big win for many customers as well, to be able to do that and to appreciate it even more.
Agreed. So I think time only goes in one direction, right? It's very hard to make time go backwards. So I think what we have seen in a lot of these things that you're describing and talking about have fundamentally tweaked, changed, diverted sort of the path here of how people will be able to do testing, of how we will do testing. But my question to you then is, what sticks, right? Eventually, a lot of people will stay remote, right? There may be people who used to work in an office who say there's really no need, I want to stay remote, or organizations who say you can work remote. Other people will come back to the office. How do some of these changes and new ways of looking at things, right? Did they stick? Did they go back in the closet? What do you think is the lasting?
So there are a couple of points to make. So in terms of organizational, I am pretty sure that more and more companies, they may not go to the extreme of Twitter where everybody can work remotely forever, but I'm pretty sure there will be more companies that will embrace more of a work from home mode, kind of a mixed one. We're definitely looking into that, and I don't think the reality of going back to the full time in the office would be the thing. Now, on the side of testing and test tooling, because we were able to kind of drive more attention to the capabilities of our test suite and to the capabilities of doing something like model-based testing, which allows you to build your tests in a much more reliable way. They're not fragile, they don't change, they don't fail because some UI changes, because you don't attach them to some user ID, but you're actually doing it at a higher level of abstraction. And because we were actually able to educate a lot of people, I can tell you, I mean, the number of, we made all of our training access to the Tricentis Academy, unlimited access for free. And the number of people who jumped on that opportunity to level their skills, was really, really great. So lots of people have discovered that as a way of thinking about how to do test design, how to do test automation. So this is going to lead to their ability to build their testing in a much, much less fragile way. So I expect that there will be lots of kind of productivity gains that people would not want to lose, and they will continue, that way. So that's my view. And I'm actually quite happy to see that so many people took on this opportunity to take these unsettling times as a way to expand their horizons and to learn more. And the same thing is true about all the conferences, right? We had our flagship conference that was supposed to be 1,000 people in San Francisco. We had to go virtual. Of course, it actually changed a lot and required a tremendous job on the field marketing professionals and marketing in general. But at the end of the day, it was super successful, and it was something that had a high level of engagement. Now, this is from the side of us transmitting and sharing our experience and knowledge with the community. On the side of me looking at how I can encourage more of the professional development of my engineers, product managers, the fact that so many events, so many conferences went virtual and became free is a blessing, because you think about something like Microsoft Build Conference, which typically would sell out within like 2 days. Then the tickets have become available. You could hardly get in, and it was always expensive, right? Or an event like Star East, right? Like the flagship event for software testers around the world. They were broadcasted not on the keynotes, but all of the breakout sessions, everything. Right. So if you think about, the times if you are passionate for learning and for self-improvement, these are like the blessed times indeed, because it's all there. And all I hope is that all of those things will still be available for the on-demand viewing later on. That's what we did with our event, with our talks. Right. We're still making them available for people to learn afterwards, because the thing is that now with so many events, what I fear is that
You
so
don't
many
have
of them
time.
are, well,
Overlap.
so many of them happening at the same time that now you need to phase it and find a way to prioritize your learning. But your ability to actually get all of that, cutting edge, right at the, very, very edge of the innovation, information, learnings, demos, ideas is phenomenal these days. So I'm looking at it as a true positive development to the teams, remote, distributed all over the world, and our industry at large.
You know what? That brings up a whole nother topic we don't have time for today about, while people are getting laid off or furloughed or the people are, right sizing, these same people who maybe are losing a job should use the opportunity. But Grigory, I promised you 20 minutes. I think we're at 25. So we're going to we'll have a part 2 on that one. But anyway, hey, I want to thank you for joining us on TechStrong TV. Great discussion. Passion. I mean, your passion comes through, and passion is contagious. I always tell people that, right? So thank you.
If I may, I just want to mention something that we've been very conscious about all the research and the scientific institutions and NGOs and government bodies that's been kind of working on finding a vaccine and everything, and we actually made our software available to them for free. Including,
Yes.
The whole load testing platform that actually underneath cost us money, maintaining the underlying infrastructure because it runs in the cloud, but we want to help in any way we can. And even we found the opportunities for some of our unused capacities or something that we may have pre-purchased or reserved and it hasn't been used by the teams. We actually participated in this Boeing project from Berkeley University, the one that actually allows you to contribute your unused capacity toward the scientific purposes.
Sort of like
to encourage everybody
for this.
Yeah, I would like to actually, I'm sharing this as a positive experience because we see this as us playing this additional role in helping combat the COVID-19, but also encourage everybody else in there who may have not been aware that this is an option to share it in the similar way. I think together we will definitely solve this. So the world will be stronger.
Back to God's ears, as we say, right?
Grigory, thank you so much, man. Say hello to
all
our
friends at TechStrong.
I will do, absolutely.
All right. Hey, this is Alan Schimmel. We're on
Alan.
TechStrong. Great speaking to you. This is Alan Schimmel. We're on TechStrong TV, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, back here in the studio, as I mentioned before, passion is contagious, and so many entrepreneurs and startup folks, I see what separates winners from losers is their passion for what they do. And my next guest here, Shali Rosen of CyberArmor, is passionate about CyberArmor's mission to change what workload security and data protection look like. So let's jump in here now with Shali Rosen and CyberArmor.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel, and welcome back to TechStrong TV. Our guest for this segment is Shali Rosen of CyberArmor. Shali, welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Shali, Shirley, I don't believe we've introduced CyberArmor to our audience, but why don't you give us a little background on CyberArmor and let us know?
Yes, of course. Thank you. We've been around for about a year and a half now, and the basic idea is that we want to make zero trust computing available across, both cloud native, hybrid, and multi-cloud environments to the DevOps people as they develop and they deploy the solutions. So the whole idea is to empower DevOps to quite seamlessly and inherently create zero trust-based security, which is constantly updating automatically onto the environment.
Excellent. Before we jump into that, just a little bit about your background, maybe?
Yeah, so my background, I'm an engineer by profession. I did a little bit of a transition into the business world and B2B enterprise after I did my graduate degree in the University of Pennsylvania. I worked in the Boston Consulting Group for a while, kind of advised for many of the executives in tech companies about their strategies, and then came back to Israel, worked for a few startups before deciding to co-found CyberArmor together with Leonid and Ben, my partners.
Fantastic. Excellent stuff. So, the concept of zero trust, I remember maybe 2 years ago at RSA, zero trust was the big buzzword, right? Everybody was talking zero trust. And our audience is a mixture of DevOps and security. I imagine the security people are very familiar with the term zero trust. The DevOps, the cloud native people may be. But why don't we start there when we talk about zero trust? The way I always try to explain it to people is this kind of whitelisting and blacklisting, right? Which in blacklisting, I specifically mention the sites I don't want or the people or the connections I don't want, but everyone else is okay. And in whitelisting, only the people I do mention specifically are okay. Everyone else is blocked. Zero trust is more like that sort of whitelisting kind of thing where basically we don't trust any person, machine, connection, etc., unless they're specifically enumerated. And it sounds great, right? For my DevOps people out there, they're saying, well, what could be bad? Of course, the problem is, someone once told me we would have great security on our computers if we only shut off the internet, right? You can't shut off the internet, and some connections you just have to make. So how does CyberArmor help in figuring out, okay, we're going to go zero trust, but how do we know which connections we should add to the whitelist or to our trust, or what is the paradigm there with it? Go ahead.
Okay. So you're right. Zero trust is, more. It's not an architecture. It's not a technology. It is more of it is just a term, right? Zero trust. Trust no one. Always verify. It has a lot of combinations. Don't trust but verify. Trust and verify. Never trust. Always verify. It goes. I can go on with all the different combinations. And you're right that it fits some environments and it less fits other environments, and it is applied today across many environments. So you can zero trust people and you can zero trust devices. What we want to propose is the notion of zero trust for workloads, workloads running on Kubernetes, on containers, on premise, those workloads that build your microservice-based architectures. And the general idea that we want to propose is we want to help you automatically trust your microservices. And the whole notion of our technology is to automatically assure that the microservices running in your environment are in a healthy state and are indeed in the state that you designed them and deployed them. So we learn in the CI/CD the DNA of the microservice. We have a patent around establishing a microservice DNA. And then in runtime, when we say zero trust, the idea is that we constantly measure whether a microservice making a request to another microservice is indeed a microservice that was meant to run and is running uncompromised in your environment. So the creation of the white, like every time you talk about zero trust, I completely relate to what you're saying. How do you create the whitelist? That's the biggest problem. And our whole notion is we automatically create a whitelist based on your CI/CD. So if a microservices went through the proper steps in your CI/CD and we can verify it and we can track it, then we whitelist it. That's the general idea.
Excellent, excellent. Now, so it's easy, when you're talking to people about cybersecurity, I think they embrace this kind of technology. They embrace the notion, the concept of zero trust. When we're talking to DevOps people, Charlie, how do you get them to buy into it, right? How do you make them understand? And then once they buy in and understand, how do we build this into sort of our CI/CD pipeline, if you will, right, into our software development life cycle?
So that's a very to-the-point question. And, we always say that our solution was made for DevOps to be trusted by CISOs. And what do we give DevOps, right? DevOps, their entire, think about the DevOps motivation. What do they want to do? The DevOps, they want to run quickly. They want to be able to constantly update and create new versions of the product. They do not want to be stopped by security gateways and security assessments and vulnerability assessments and security architecture reviews, etc. So this is exactly what we want to eliminate. If by deploying our solution in the CI/CD, we can reassure the CISOs that the output environment, that the resulting environment will be secured by nature, and not just secured, zero trust based secured, we remove many of the barriers that today DevOps are facing in order to move fast. So the whole notion of our solution is to remove the friction between DevOps and security. And we do it exactly like you said, by seamlessly integrating into the CI/CD. So if you have a CI/CD tools, let's say Circle CI, Jenkins, Azure Pipelines, we will plug in seamlessly into it. You already have steps in that pipeline. We are just another step in this pipeline. And just by going through this state, you are creating a very strong whitelist that then will be able to be enforced in runtime. So the CISO is very pleased, and the DevOps, they continue to work with the tools they're already working with and with the velocity that they crave and that they want. And that's what I think is the value that we have to the DevOps. We enable them the speed of development that they expect.
Absolutely. And so, let me back up a sec. When we look at the CI/CD, the software development life cycle, right, and especially when we talk about DevSecOps, the notion of shifting left, right, of getting involved, getting these concepts, getting these tools involved earlier and earlier, further left in the development cycle. Where does CyberArmor, how far left, if you will, is CyberArmor in this kind of continuum?
So we thought about what is the right balance between when is it too left to go? When did we go too much to the left?
Can you go too left? Right, yeah.
Yeah, and we thought that if we cause the developer to change the way they work, that is too much to the left. So, for example, if our solution is an SDK that the developer needs to embed in his solution, too much to the left. If it's assessing the way developers write their code and give them recommendation on how they should write it differently, too much to the left. So we wanted to start our engagement as much to the left as we can without involving developers. And that would be once you have the build phase. So right after the build phase, where you have an image that is now starting to get deployed, this is where we fit in. We can scan the image and create our DNA based on this image. And we will follow that image. It's not like we are just there. We're starting there, and we are actually accommodating and going together with that image throughout the CI/CD lifecycle. So we started the build, and then that image goes and runs in the dev environment, and we learn some more, and we build the DNA there, and then it goes to the staging, and we finalize the DNA, and then by the time it gets to production, we are able to be really, really assured of the identity and what should be the DNA of the workload to protect it in runtime.
Excellent, excellent. So, you know, the thing about DevOps is all of these things, and not just DevSecOps, all of the CI/CD tools work within this pipeline, within this life cycle thing. But the tools integrate and where they fit in. Where does CyberArmor, you mentioned Jenkins, for instance. So I imagine there's like a Jenkins plugin. Yeah. What about like in a Kubernetes environment, or, you know, a different kind of environment, or maybe people who aren't using Jenkins? Where does it work does it work to do the code in GitHub or GitLab, or, you know, some of the other tools out there?
Yeah. So we are manifested, for a lack of a better term, or we exist in two main places. One is in the CI/CD within Jenkins and Circle CIs and those, not yet in GitHub. But the second place is, you know, eventually you need to protect the running environment.
Yeah.
So we're also natively integrated to Kubernetes. We have a partnership with Red Hat around, we are certified for OpenShift. And the idea is that once the workload, that we established the whitelist of the workloads, and we know the DNA of the workloads from the CI/CD, the biggest part of our technology is that when that workload appears at runtime in the dev environment or in the production environment, in Kubernetes or as part of a container, we immediately see it, and we can immediately start to protect it by actually assuring that it is continuously matching the DNA that we have created in CI/CD time. And once we see a deviation from that, we know that an attack has happened, and now we can do remediation. We can restart it, we can prevent it from accessing data or accessing network, etc. And that's, I kind of like roll back to the notion of zero trust. Once that DNA signature is broken, you can no longer trust that microservice, so you don't give it the authorization that it needs.
Fantastic. Now, another important concept in DevOps and all this is the feedback loop, right? So we engineer it, let's say with zero trust, we deploy, but now we learn things post-deployment, and we're also constantly updating the software, right? There's iteration. Talk to me about how CyberArmor sort of creates that feedback loop of, hey, what we see here in deployment that maybe is breaking something or is not expected gets back into, so that in the next iteration, that in the next deployment, it's updated.
That would be through our visibility capabilities, which basically takes out the visibility of the environment and feeds it back into the CI/CD systems and gives full visibility as to which workload is communicating with which workload is accessing what data. And if someone wants to change the way it is working, they will do it based on that. And when they change, we also are automatically updated. So it's a circle where we are continuously updating what is or what could be a desired state of memory, a desired state of environment from the CI/CD. So there is no gap. The idea is that, what is the problem with security and these new architectures? The main problem is that security mindset used to be, I look at an environment, I understand the architecture and I devise a solution for that architecture. Okay, but what if that architecture changes every 5 minutes or even every 5 hours? It becomes impossible to reassess the architecture and redeploy the solution. What we do is we constantly learn the new architecture and apply zero trust for that architecture automatically. That's a big part of the feedback loop.
Good stuff. Surely, I told you when we started, the 20 minutes goes very quick. So we're about out of time here. But you know what? I realized I didn't tell people. How could they get more information about CyberArmor?
Well, the best way would be, to go to our site, cyberarmor.io. Everything is there. They can shoot us an email in the site and we'll be able to talk and show a demo. We have weekly demos that are running, so someone can sign up to those weekly demos. We're happy to engage. I'm very excited about the company and the technology, so any excuse to show someone and tell someone about it, I'm going to take it.
Absolutely. You know what? I apologize that our time got away from us here. There was more I wanted to talk to you about. Maybe we'll have you back on in a couple of weeks. We'll continue the conversation.
Yeah, that'd be great. We don't only have to talk about CyberArmor. I know we want to...
No, let's talk DevSecOps. Yeah, it was the first time I wanted to lay it out so people would be familiar, but we'll talk more.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you. Shirley Rosen, CyberArmor, here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
I got the burgers. I went to Bun Barn, Beef Patty Palace, Tomato Town.
Oh, thanks for getting all this, honey.
No problem. Getting all of it just took about 2 hours.
I just wish there was an easier way to get all your burger fixings from one place,
Oh.
Dad, you didn't go to Mayo King?
You know our car doesn't fit in their drive-thru. I went to Mustard Chef.
I hate this burger.
He also went to ketchup.
When you're building something using components that don't work together easily, things could get ugly, fast. You wouldn't live like this, so don't your DevOps live like this.
This lack of burger cohesion is hard on all of us, Cheryl.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle.
Now it's that time of the show where we're going to go back into the archives and pull something out. I went back to just RSA conference where we were live on Broadcast Alley this past February, end of February. And I pulled out an interview I did with my friend Ofer Israeli of Elusive Networks. Elusive is one of the pioneers of the deception technology space. If you're not familiar with what deception technology is, pay attention here as Ofer tells us about it. It's an up-and-coming area in security that people are using. So going back to RSA 2020 is Ofer Israeli from Elusive Networks.
This is Digital Anarchist at RSA San Francisco 2020.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com Security Boulevard. And here we are, Thursday, day 3 of our coverage from the RSA conference. We are, I guess, getting towards the home stretch, right, of RSA. It's been a crazy couple days. Our next guest is Ofer Israeli. He's the CEO founder of, I'm drawing a blank, Elusive Networks. Elusive Networks. I apologize, Ofer. Now, Elusive is one of the leaders in a really, last year it was up and coming. This year it's here already. Deception technology. And he's going to explain to you what that is, especially for my DevOps audience out here, right? You guys may not know. The security people probably a little bit more. But let's start with there, Ofer. What do we mean when we talk about deception technology?
Yeah. So when we talk about deception, we think about deception in two various different lights. Both of them being how do we protect our internal pieces of the network, right? So how do we go beyond just trying to keep stuff out and knowing that we will have attackers inside our networks, how can we get to them really, really quickly? There's two very different approaches in deception. One being more decoys, honeypot-centric, which is more a threat intelligence play. How do I capture an attacker, study him, figuring him out? That's relevant for the small sliver of very sophisticated organizations. And then there's a lot broader play, which is endpoint-based deception, which is the threat detection play. How do we catch these guys? How do we do it early, effective, efficient, and ensure that we're ahead of the game?
Excellent. That was a good baseline. So, as you and I were talking about off camera, we're in sort of a post-apocalyptic world here, right? Where we've been through the perimeter and the endpoint and moving to the cloud, and now we're talking about the edge. And it seems as this grows and becomes more complex, our security responses have grown more complex. I'm going to give you a perfect example. I was talking to a few people this week, and one guy, people I know in the industry a long time, one guy, he runs a lab at one of the big public security companies. He runs the lab there, and he said, I remember in 2007, we were pushing, a quarter of a terabyte a month, 500 or 250 gigs a month, and we thought that was so outrageous. Well, we push a quarter of a petabyte a month now.
Yep.
Right? So increased by a factor of 1,000. But don't worry, we have better AI and machine learning algorithms, so we can go through that data, more efficiently, even though it's 1,000 times more data. Yeah. Is that really the answer, though? Is that really where we want to be? We just want to pile on more and more?
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic question. And in my humble opinion, absolutely not. And the reason being, I think a couple different things, but we've been aggregating this whole amount of data and so on and trying to sift through it and get through, tons of false positives and tons of misfires and so on and so forth. And we almost lost sight of what is it we're trying to achieve. We've built these alert machines that will produce alerts on many, many different things from all angles, everywhere, all of the time. But that's what is the means to the end there, right? What are we really trying to get at? And the way we view it is, how do we do exactly the opposite? How do we not have this alert machine? How do we not have people that are sifting through the noise? How do we get things that are purely accurate and then start to automate around that, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can get to that level of accuracy, I think you're in a different level of state. You mentioned also, in regards to AI, I think a lot of the world is going through disillusionment in that regard, where it was kind of thought of, we'll get this massive amount of data,
of course it's a
little AI.
About it, because whenever your hype cycle is so high, it can never live up to it. It was down to happen, right? I mean, and the thing, we do that over and over again with stuff. This is the new magic bullet.
Exactly.
Same as the old magic bullet.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, there is some real good that we can get from AI, that we can get from machine learning. We just can't bet the house on it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We should leverage those capabilities. Yeah. We should use them to their best extent, but we should also be very realistic about what it can and what it can't achieve, right?
Yeah, agreed. So, tell us what's doing with Elusive then. How does Elusive help the people out watching this, give them a little bit of security, right? A sense of security, make them more secure, but also maybe simplify the mission, if you will.
Sure.
Right?
So with Elusive, as should be the case with any security vendor, our whole purpose is how do we enable the organization to focus on their business, right? And not focus on what's attacking them. Mm-hmm. And the way we think about this is that if you're able to build a solution that is very easy to stand up and roll out, doesn't require a lot of people or a lot of effort, and at the same time exactly doesn't produce that alert machine, produces a very silent system that will seldomly alert, and when it does, it actually counts and you can jump when needed to, then you've done exactly that, right? And then you kind of avoid this problem of the skills shortage and how do I chase my own tail with more and more data and consuming it and figuring it out and so on and so forth. But having something that'll work for you, it'll do its thing, it'll call you up proactively, if you will, when need be.
Yep. Excellent. I want to ask you a CEO kind of question, though, Ofer. Look, when you're talking to people in the industry here, of course they've heard of deception technology, and if they've heard of deception, they've probably heard of your company. You're one of the leaders in it. When you're talking to a broader, audience, how do you, right? You don't want to sell snake oil, right? We're not going to tell them this is the vaccine they're looking for, right? But how do you bring it all together? Siri's starting with me. How do you bring it all together?
Send her my regards.
Yeah, hello. I don't even want to say the name, it'll start. How do you tie what you're doing with deception technology into your defense in depth, your standard security model, if we can call it that?
Yeah. So allow me to answer twice. We think of ourselves as the means to protect for anything moving inside the network, right? So defense in depth, keep the stuff out as best as you can, put up your controls as best as you can, but also anticipate the fact there will be an attacker inside your network. Maybe it's an external threat actor, maybe it's a malicious insider. In any case, that attacker needs to move in order to be successful. We can stop that. We can ensure that when he's in, he's paralyzed. He can't move. Right. He can't go to the next spot. So that's kind of the way we think about it in terms of where our portion in the world is in that regard. The second bit I would say is that I think a lot of this, like anything in my opinion in security, it really counts when you're very successful with your customers, right? And our kind of take on it is we provide very unique value to our customers. We catch things that no other security solution they currently own catches, and that gets the word out, right? Because they talk to their peers, and it gets out, and we're getting inbound requests from companies that have said, we've heard what you've done for X, Y, or Z,
right?
And we want to talk.
And again, that sets up its own hype cycle, right? Because then you become sort of this urban myth, urban legend, right? Oh yeah, just put deception, elusive in, nothing to worry about. And that's always the fatal, right?
Yep.
What is it? The 7 deadly sins, right? That's one of the biggest ones. So it's interesting because I think people in our industry are always gravitating to the next greatest thing. And like you said, with AI, you don't want deception technology to be the next greatest thing. That next year we're sitting here saying, well, it didn't work like we thought it would. We still have a security problem. Nothing is the bullet on that. That being said, how's RSA? What's been the reception at RSA this year from the industry?
It's been fantastic. So what we've seen probably over the last year, but even more so over the last several months, you started off with this, deception is here. And the amount of companies that we're seeing that are adopting deception now and have projects for this year to do it is phenomenal. So it's actually breathtaking to see how much of a jump the industry has got over these last few months.
Absolutely. It was funny, I was talking, I forgot if it was Monday or Tuesday, I was chatting with a CISO at a large enterprise, and he said really he had 2 main projects this year, and one was deception technology, and one was around threat intel and all of that, which everyone is then figuring out how do I get actionable on that. But those seem to be that's good for you.
It is.
Good for you.
It is.
We don't have a lot of time left, but tell our audience if they want to get more information. Obviously they go to elusivenetworks.com.
That's right.
But give more than the URL. Give them a path to go down. What should they do?
Yeah, definitely contact us through elusivenetworks.com. We've built a very simple and easy way to engage with customers to be able to show them the value of managing your attack surface and of deception within a couple hours. Literally within a couple hours. Within a couple hours.
So you heard it here. Always telling you, within a couple hours, you can have this up running and get some protection.
That's right.
We're going to hold you to it, my friend.
All right, done.
All right, a pleasure having you here. Ofer Israeli, CEO, Elusive Networks. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com, Security Boulevard. We're live at RSA. We'll be back in just a moment with our next interview. Back in the studio, it's time for the news. Usual roundup of headlines at Security Boulevard, Container Journal, DevOps. So, for Security Boulevard, is your corporate access data for sale on the dark web? Probably. Unfortunately, I had my own data theft issue and identity theft issue last month, and I'm just real down on it at the time. But anyway, good article on there. Go check that out. Also on Security Boulevard, enabling secure dynamic network access with SaaS. Good stuff. We've been seeing this. I believe that article is from my friend Frank Olhurst. And Frank always does a good job. He has a lot of expertise in the cyber area. Over on Container Journal, we have OpenTelemetry offers business continuity for monitoring. And we have CNCF gets a new boss. And a little surprised to hear that. But go check out the article. I don't want to spill the beans and ruin it. Go read the article. DevOps.com, we have Build or Buy. 5 reasons why your application needs an error monitoring system versus building your own. Then we have ZenHub, updates project management app for DevOps. And PagerDuty automates incident management. PagerDuty's been automating incident management for years. And they just keep doing more and more and a better job of it. So that's my news for today. I think, as I always say, go check out the sites individually. There's so much more out there than just these headlines I give you. Now, though, we are going to go to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene's guest literally wrote the book on remote work, which we're all doing now, but he wrote the book way before. And it's really been the book that GitLab follows, as they have an all-remote and always have had an all-remote strategy. So let's now go to Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor, with her interview.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with someone who is an expert at the work-from-home paradigm, Darren Murph, who's head of remote at GitLab. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes, Darren. It's great to see you.
Absolutely. Great to be seen. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, first, let's talk about your title, head of remote at GitLab. I know GitLab is a completely remote company, correct?
Yep, that's right. So over 1,200 of us spread across more than 65 countries, all remote.
Great. So what do you do as head of remote?
So I do a couple of things. One, I help people onboard and acclimate to a remote setting. For a lot of people, if they come with decades of co-located experience, some of the things that we do can be unorthodox. We make sure that they can acclimate well. So I lead the development of the all remote section of the GitLab handbook, which is public, which covers how we do everything related to remote. And I also work with other clients and partners, universities, on telling our remote story, but also helping other people acclimate to remote as well.
Okay, well, I guess if anybody has the remote thing down, it's you. I've been doing remote working for the better part of 12 years, and I know that it certainly takes a particular type of personality to be able to be comfortable in a work from home environment and be productive. But it's certainly, it definitely takes kind of that person who can kind of go for hours on end, being in a quote unquote non-social environment. So, what are you telling employees for you guys, because you are work from home, 100% remote, I imagine it's not been a big deal during the pandemic for your employees. It's kind of business as usual. But if you're talking with other companies and other folks, how do you help them kind of get used to, working from home, and what do employees need to keep in mind?
Well, the first thing I'll say is intentionally designed remote work is not what we're experiencing now en masse. This is very much crisis-induced work from home, which is very different. And at GitLab, we're actually very articulate about that. We say that you don't have to work from home. We'll reimburse a co-working space or an external office if you prefer that. Not everyone's home is amenable to remote work. And so we have about a fifth of our company that does that. And right now they've been shoved back into their homes. And so they're in a suboptimal situation as well. So it's definitely important to compartmentalize those and realize that work from home and remote will get better as the global situation improves and you have more freedom and flexibility. But for teams, what I recommend from leadership is to be more receptive to feedback than you usually would and shift the mentality from a command and control type of situation to a servant leadership. And what I mean by this is overnight, you have your entire team operating from a desk that looks nothing like what they had. They might not have the right equipment. They might not have noise canceling headphones or an ergonomic workspace at home. Their entire workspace has changed. So for leadership, it's really important to be a feedback mechanism to receive that feedback, and then that will sort of chart your path on what gaps you need to fill to make sure that people can thrive away from the office as well. For the individuals that are working from home for the first time, try to separate work and life as best you can. If you have an enclave or a separate room where you can work, and so work happens here and life happens here, use that. We even have some people at GitLab, they're in small areas, but they have a work chair and a non-work chair. And so if they're sitting in their work chair, they'll do work. But if they're not sitting in it, laptop is closed, they're not working. And for people that are used to having a commute, I strongly recommend taking that time you used to spend on a commute and putting a calendar invite on your own calendar with something other than a commute, whether that's reading or resting or exercising, cooking, cleaning, spending time with family, calling your parents, whatever it may be. Put something on the calendar. Be very intentional about that. It will help you mentally ramp into your day and ramp out of your day with something that bookends either side of that day. If you don't do this, it's really easy to blur the lines between work and life, and you reach this cycle of burnout where you essentially sleep and work and sleep and work. And for people that aren't used to working remotely and being a manager of one, as we like to say, being very intentional about how you structure your day, it's very easy to fall into this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've heard anecdotally from a number of people how many more hours they're working remotely because they just can't turn it off at the end of the day. They don't have that buffer, if you will. And it's very easy to have the personal life kind of bleed into the work life. Some people, myself included, get up super early and we just start working, period. But that's the way I work. And then I'll take a break and do my exercise or whatever I need to do and then go back to work. So for me, I kind of have segmented my day in different ways, in different ways to be able to kind of have my work life and my home life mesh together. And it works well for me, but I imagine for certain other people, it just doesn't work that way. So, how can you kind of, beyond that commute hour, which I love, by the way, I think it's a great idea, but what are some of the other things that employees can do to really help separate their home life from their work life? Like I said, beyond the commute, beyond having the chair, that's great too. Beyond having that separate space, it's very easy to have a kid come in and say, I need help with homework, or, dinner's got to get ready, or there's always something that can so very easily pull them away.
Yeah. You bring up a great point, and it's something that I do as well. And what I say is that you've kind of reached phase 2 or phase 3 of working remote. So what I recommend is for people to respect the routine initially. If you're used to working a rigid schedule, intentionally book in your day with something in place of the commute. But the next phase of that is to use your imagination to experiment with what your day could look like if you didn't have to stick to that rigidity. And this is where you start to really unlock the power of remote. What you were alluding to is something that I define as a non-linear workday. And I do this as well, where I'll wake up, I'll have my morning routine, and then I'll do a little bit of work. And generally I'll pause, I'll go do a workout, I'll hang out with my son and my wife, and then I'll come back and I'll work a little bit later into the evening than most people would on the East Coast. A lot of my team is on the West Coast, so it actually helps for me to be available a little bit later in the evening. And frankly, that's when my peak productivity hours are. So I'm able to structure my day in a stop-start fashion, but that that takes a lot of intentionality, and it takes a lot of deliberation for the individual. But experiment with that. You are home now, or you're working from somewhere other than the office, so you do have more leeway. And of course, communicate this with your team. But if you work on asynchronous workflows, which I think from a leadership perspective is vital, you need to ensure that your team can communicate as asynchronously as possible to reduce the reliance on meetings and synchronicity. This is really, really important. The second thing I'll say here is don't stop interfacing with other people. This is really, really important. Isolation is a key theme that is brought up in remote. One thing I would say is if you've been filling your social quota 100% at the office, ask yourself, is that really the healthiest way to do it? I actually recommend people to think about their neighbors, their community, their family, their extended family, maybe people that they haven't reached out to in a really long time. Should you be filling some of that social quota from relationships outside of work? This pause is an amazing time to ask yourself that and get introspective on what that means for you. But on the work front, for leaders, make sure your people have a place and an atmosphere where they can converse about things other than work. At GitLab, we expire all of our Slack messages after 90 days intentionally so that work doesn't happen in Slack. Instead, Slack is a list of public topical channels, things like hiking or biking or cooking, video games, mental health, parenting. The parenting channel is all the rage right now with so many
I can imagine.
having children home and trying to figure out how do I become a homeschool teacher overnight. But it's great that we've created this atmosphere where parents can just be real with each other and have real parent-to-parent conversations that aren't about work. And that helps reduce the mental load and the anxiety that's generally associated with the red bubble on Slack. If it's something about lectures and parenting, then it's obviously less urgent than if it's about work. And also just do simple things that require intentionality. Our marketing team a couple of weeks ago had 130 people over 6 continents join for a talent show. This was really easy to arrange. You just put a calendar invite on everyone on the marketing team's calendar with an agenda on it that says, sign up here if you have a talent. We had a panel of judges, we had prizes, and for 90 minutes, we all just got to watch each other do foolish things. And it was really amazing from a team bonding perspective. And this comes back to the scarcity versus abundance mindset. Instead of saying, what can't we do now that we don't have the office? Think about a 130-person talent show that you could definitely not pull off in the office. But it takes some intentionality and thinking through what opportunities look like.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So, looking at kind of maybe a broader perspective from the employer point of view, that the companies out there that traditionally have, either resisted or just outright banned working from home or working remotely, suddenly they've been forced to allow it. And there's been, I would imagine, a huge cultural shift happening there as well. So how do you get companies, once that now that they've kind of had to experience it by fire, if you will, how do you get them to kind of culturally shift to maybe not just so much adopting, but maybe even embracing the work from home paradigm moving forward, even after the pandemic has passed?
Yeah, so the biggest thing here is your culture has to be written down. So your cultures are the values that you have documented. And for a lot of companies in co-located spaces, their culture has been defined by office decor or what neighborhood they choose to locate in, the loudest voice in the room, these kinds of things. When you talk about office culture or office vibe, that's generally what you're referencing. It rarely has something to do with the actual values that you write down. So for companies that haven't written down their values or they haven't exemplified them in a major way, this is a jarring situation where you have to get real with yourself and say, we need to write down our values. We need to write down what our values look like to be exemplified and lived out so that people can look at those in a single source of truth in a handbook and say, this is how I'm expected to treat clients. This is how I'm expected to treat other individuals, regardless of where they are, regardless if I'm talking in person, if I'm talking over Zoom, over a phone call. This has to be written down. This isn't a massive challenge. I think most companies have some idea of it, but you have to take the extra step to actually write that down so that everyone can universally look at this and say, okay, this is my North Star on how I treat each other. The other thing to remember is this isn't a us versus them type of situation. A lot of people really love going to the office. They love that break between their home life and the office life. And if they have a short commute and it's not really grueling, and they love the act of getting dressed and the act of going out, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like you have to delete that forever or completely walk away from that forever. The point is, leadership needs to understand that the role of the office is changing in a big way. And what I recommend to teams is to get your head around this concept, which is the office is simply a place you go to work remotely. Just like another co-working space, just like an apartment building, you have to design your culture to work as a remote team first. It has to be able to function regardless if someone is in the office or out of the office, on a plane, in a hotel room, it doesn't matter. Design your culture to work well remotely first. And then if people choose to go into the office, that's just another place they go to experience the remote culture that you've built. And that's the biggest paradigm shift. People have this persona around the office as if it's something different. There's something in the office that can't be taken outside of the office. And that's really dangerous. You actually want your culture to go away with people, to spread far and wide. And so now is this great opportunity to really reevaluate what the role of the office is and ensure that whether people show up or not on any given day or not, that your culture stays balanced.
Yeah, that makes sense. So many companies, dictate that you have to be at your desk at 9 o'clock and you have to be there until 5 o'clock. And, and it's like, there's absolutely no reason why you can't be productive between the hours of 10 and 4 and get the same amount done. But, when we're talking about long-term for this, because obviously, this could be the start of what might be kind of a regular thing for us as, when the next pandemic hits, we're going to have to do this again. So, as more people do kind of shift to working from home regularly or remotely regularly, and more companies embrace the idea of maybe having only half their staff come in a part of the week and then the other half, or drop into the office when you feel like it or something like that. What are some of the kind of the longer term effects of kind of this new way of working and not just on the business, but on society as a whole?
I think the second and third order effects of this are hugely positive, and it's one of the outcomes that I'm actually excited to see. It's we can't wish away the crisis. We can only choose how we respond to it. And I think if you look a bit further ahead, we're going to look at this moment and say, this was the catalyst that we've been waiting for. This gives us permission to do things differently. And I think long-term companies, people, society, and even cities are going to benefit from this. Look, added flexibility is not a bad thing. Added transparency, added accountability is not a bad thing. And you look at businesses, they've been looking for ways to de-risk their business. This happening again. If a crisis hits, but your business isn't in one specific geographic place, you're able to be more resilient. You're able to de-risk the business. So I think people or companies and leaders are coming around to that. You look at major urban tech centers, New York, San Francisco, London, Singapore, they're already strained to the max. They already have massive housing problems. Cost of living there is stratospheric. And it's mostly because the opportunities are there. So it has warped the ratio of native San Franciscans to people that have just come there for work. And I think longer term, if you give people permission to leave those places and go back to wherever home is, or start a new home in a smaller or mid-sized community where they can have a bigger impact, you subsequently allow new places for people that have been displaced to come back and actually contribute to a city that means something to them. And I think cities on the whole are going to breathe a sigh of relief. They've been looking for, how do we expand our subway system? How do we expand public services? Already we're stretched to the max. This is an amazing moment for a lot of people who are there only for their vocation to go somewhere else. And that will, the second order effect of that is that cities will have less strain. So I really do feel like long-term, this will be a net positive. And even for big skyscrapers where they have offices right now, and they're worried about what are we going to do if we're not in office anymore? Well, you were going to have to change the office anyway for social distancing measures. So instead of spending millions of dollars to just make sure fewer people can work in there, just convert them to apartments. And then at the same time, you solve a lot of the housing problems that are in these big cities. Humans are very innovative. We adapt really well. I have no doubts that they'll figure out how to adapt with that. But if all of this leads to more flexibility for both society and businesses, I think that's a major win.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to this pandemic passing, but I'm also really looking forward to seeing what comes next as a society and in the technology space, and basically with all parts of our lives that have been impacted by this. So, Darren, thanks very much for having the conversation with me. Good stuff. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. Be well.
You too. You too. Okay, guys, we've got plenty more coming up on TechStrong TV, so please stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Next up on TechStrong TV, it's time for the channel roundup with our friend Mike Vizard. And here's Mike giving us the latest news on channel.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, here we are talking about the channel one more time. Frank, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm good, but like a lot of people, I'm confused. I can't make heads or tails of this marketplace that we're in. If I look at some forecast numbers from Gartner, they're talking about a 13% decline in endpoint consumption, which I guess includes consumer stuff, so maybe people don't have money to buy that gear. But at the same time, you look at Dell's numbers posted, and their client side is up and their server side just basically took a beating. Overall, they did pretty well. The Gartner analysts are saying we should be lucky that it's only dropping 13% given the forecast that they put out. And I guess there's a lot of things moving in the cloud. So if you're a channel partner, I think you really have to be smart about picking your spots, because some things are getting hammered and other things like the cloud seems to be this massive shift going on. I've talked to anybody involved in digital business transformation projects, and they're all saying they had a great quarter. This includes Rancher Labs talking about adoption of Kubernetes, all the way over to BMC talking about their latest acquisition of CompuWare for mainframes, and they were saying, hey, they both put it out of the park last quarter. So what do you think is going on here?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm seeing other increases out there, like accelerated adoption of SD-WAN and, people trying to leverage SASE, secure access of the service edge, in a way to deal with the failings of VPN. So, I mean, there's a lot of churn going on with the technologies, but I don't think it's kind of settled down on what's going to take the lead yet, because I think we're seeing a lot of different reactions and different opinions from the enterprises out there. You've got several that are very successfully, accelerated their digital transformation to support a remote workforce. And then you've got others that have run into all sorts of problems. I think it's going to be very difficult to predict what's going to happen over the next month or two.
I wonder, though, if there's a lot of sins that are being just swept up into the COVID-19 numbers or blamed on COVID-19, and people are going, hey, now's a good time to clean house because Wall Street might not beat us up as much if we say it's all COVID-19 related. But I wonder if a lot of these issues have been long simmering. Let's take the server numbers. Things have been migrating to the cloud for a while, and yeah, we may be seeing some accelerated shifts into the cloud, but those numbers probably were heading in that direction all along. So maybe the server business and the storage business that's attached to that is going to be in trouble forever.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, you also have to look at how servers are being better leveraged nowadays. Look at how popular containers have become. Look at how much more advanced virtualization products have become. Look at the VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure. Some of those things you would kind of think would increase the need for servers, but if you're introducing efficiencies, maybe you don't have to increase the actual need for servers right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. All these platforms are getting much more efficient, and the upgrade cycles may be getting longer as a result because people are saying, hey, we can run more apps than ever per machine. Starting to feel a lot like a mainframe, huh?
Yeah, and you even look at it from the point of view of from the development angle with the adoption of DevOps. This rapid ability to improve applications and focus on core needs instead of going through the waterfall process and building these huge applications that ultimately you wind up only using 20% of. So maybe there's economies of scale coming into place from there as well.
All right, so speaking of cloud companies that seem to be benefiting from all this, ServiceNow has got a big conference coming up this week. And late last week, they were talking about a new partner initiative, which is largely driven around the idea that they're going to have partners build apps and put it in this marketplace of theirs. This is a fairly common strategy across most folks these days. The interesting thing to me about ServiceNow is, they're kind of like at the altar of IT service management, and pretty much anything to do with old style operations, they revolve around. And yet we hear a lot about DevOps, and they, of course, are talking about extensions to their platform to embrace DevOps, but that's not necessarily them doing DevOps. I'm curious, what is the opportunity around ServiceNow right now? What are you hearing from people? Because I know it's considered one of the leading lights of the industry at the moment, but I wonder if there's a weakness there.
Well, I mean, ServiceNow has been used by, of course, the services industry for, quite some time. And you look at it as one of the tool sets for MSPs and folks like that in the channel. Where the future might be is when you start looking at enterprises adopting some of these ITSM type platforms for use internally. Now, the question becomes, do the partners become sellers of the ServiceNow technology? Or can they also become the operators of the technology, becoming, a provider of a solution from a different angle for enterprises? Now, DevOps, DevSecOps, NetOps, it's all kind of changing how networks and applications and everything that goes along with it are developed and managed. If ServiceNow can put the hooks into their platform to better embrace that, it might help folks with the transition to those new ideas on how to develop things and deliver things. But, it's a little bit hard to see at this point in time how much of an uptake there'll be.
I think it all comes down to who owns the paper. Essentially, with a lot of these SaaS services, if you are just essentially referring them, you get, a small check and a pat on the head and off you go. And then they try to manage the renewal process. And of course, that's been uneven in most of these SaaS plays. And they come crawling back to partners looking for them to help them get that renewal business and the activation going deeper into those accounts. but I'm not sure they compensate the partners for their time and effort to go do that. And I think a lot of partners would just as soon own the transaction if they could. And so that's why you see them still building most of their managed services around their own socks and knocks. It'll be interesting to see what happens here with Bill McDermott. He's a savvy guy, but he's out to make ServiceNow the next biggest company in the IT space. He wants to probably rival SAP and Oracle in size. Do you think that's possible?
I'm not so sure that something like that would be possible. I mean, a lot of it is going to come down to, how he engages with the channel and how the channel can engage with the enterprises. Mm-hmm. You also have to look at it from the point of view that you have a lot of enterprises taking a different approach. They're going either hybrid cloud or they're, via digital transformation, turning their legacy applications into the equivalent of software as a service type implementations that they're going to push out internally. Maybe the opportunity is for the channel folks out there to consult on those projects and help those things be built.
All right. There was also big news this week from the land of Docker and containers. We saw Microsoft tighten its relationship with Docker Inc. And now I can essentially use VS Code to launch and build apps using Docker Desktop, which is more tightly integrated. And then the whole thing is integrated with the Azure Container Service. One of the things I like about this deal is that it does take multi-million number of developers that know something about Visual Studio and turns them potentially into developers of containerized applications. So is this the shot in the arm that we've been looking for all these years?
Potentially. I mean, I think this has the potential to make a big difference, especially for those developers. It eases the path for them to get into, developing applications that are containerized, because they do not have to change their core tool set and they don't have to learn everything from scratch to deal with containers. And, when you look at, the VS equal ecosystem out there, you've got millions of folks that are very, very comfortable with using, Microsoft's visual tools. So I think there's a potential for Microsoft to become one of the leaders when it comes to developing containerized applications, as bizarre as that may sound.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Microsoft people are just learning how to spell the word Docker, right? Never much what to do with it, but progress is coming. Speaking of which, Mirantis was talking about supporting Windows nodes inside a Kubernetes cluster. They added support for Kubernetes 1.117. I think that's how that moniker works. But the point is, you still need a Linux master node, but now you can mix and match Windows nodes and Linux nodes. Do you think we're going to see a lot more of Kubernetes and these Docker type of platforms in Windows environments soon?
Definitely, because there's so much interest in those platforms that, from Microsoft's point of view, they have to begin to leverage the technology. But also, when you look at the number of Microsoft shops out there that are starting to look towards containerized solutions, if you can give them the ability to not have to change their core technology to be able to leverage these new platforms, I think you can potentially hit a home run when it comes to getting more and more containers out there.
Yeah, we'll see how this turns out, but I think it may be a huge opportunity for channel partners, because the Linux space has always been a little bit difficult for them in that it requires a lot of skills. And if Microsoft simplifies this, a lot of channel partners can play where they might not normally have been a factor before. All right, speaking of things that are interesting and different, there's a little outfit called CTO AI, and they launched this thing called DevOps or SlackOps. And their whole argument is that the whole DevOps IT management motion can be embedded within the Slack communications platform, and they've created a separate channel for all of that stuff. And of course, we're seeing a lot of other platforms that are similar. And I'm just curious, do you think that these Slack platforms and Teams and whatever else out there is going to become the new interface for managing IT?
It's really hard to guess on that because you've got, folks out there that love Slack or hate Slack. And if you look at, it from a cultural perspective on how teams are going to interact, the whole DevOps ideology, along with DevSecOps and whatnot, really upsets that apple cart of culture. Now you start throwing in different methods to communicate into the mix. You might start seeing, kind of a wholesale protest over going that way. On the other hand, if people can unlearn how they've done things in the past, going this route can offer a lot of advantages in productivity and also making sure that you have a smooth communications flow that can be highly integrated with the development and delivery process. That's where kind of the light is at the end of the tunnel. Whether or not people embrace it is going to be, the bigger question at this point in time.
Are you saying we need a little Slack etiquette? It's just too easy to kick off a message and annoy everybody on the same channel for little or no value and no reason? I'm shocked.
Yes.
All right. Now, elsewhere, Cisco acquired Thousand Eyes. Thousand Eyes is famous for being able to show you where everything on the internet went. Basically, they have an agent that goes into everything. Cisco is saying that agent will eventually find its way into everything they do. So it's going to be embedded in every switch and router, and also going to be embedded within App Dynamics. So they're going to use this to feed the APM platform. And I find this interesting because, they've been talking about intent-based networking for a long time. And then they turn around and acquire Thousand Eyes. And I'm like, that's a great move. But how are you planning to do that without something like Thousand Eyes all along anyway? So I wonder if this is putting a little actual meat on the bone.
It definitely is. I mean, it's going to give them access to the technology to make this possible. But what I, have to question about that is when it comes down to all of the new privacy concerns and elements like that is starting to get in the way of, application analytics. Where applications wind up running and, how they're delivered. And I'm wondering if there is going to be some type of a challenge from the business side about, how much information do we really want to be responsible for when it comes to interacting with our clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an esoteric concern down the road. I think right now, though, most people are flying blind. They're throwing apps out there. There's performance issues. How you experience a SaaS app in Wisconsin is not quite the same as it is in California. And everybody wants to know, is that because of some sort of exchange peering point in some obscure location, or is it the location of the workload in the cloud? And I think what people forget is that physics matters in the cloud. And what I like about Thousand Eyes is it gives you some sense of where things are going. I'm just kind of surprised that it's taken somebody so long to get around to acquire it.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I mean, there's also, a bit of a technical burden with integrating that technology across everything. And I think that's going to be a bigger challenge for Cisco at this point in time as well.
Yeah, I think that may be a while before we see all this come together. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is security. And I wonder if, you're old enough, I think. You remember the movie The Graduate, and the dude comes by and he says, hey, when you're a kid coming out of college, plastics, it's all plastics. And is cybersecurity become the new plastics? There was a report highlighting that there's still 200,000 jobs posted in the last 30 days on LinkedIn for cybersecurity expertise. And now everybody who's getting laid off from their job, whether they're in IT or not, or kids coming out of college, will jump into cybersecurity. So could we wind up with maybe a glut by this time next year? What do you think is happening in this space?
It's very possible. I mean, I was only, I think, 3 years old when The Graduate came out. So, I saw the movie much, much later in life, but so I know about the whole talk about plastics. But that said, the interesting thing about cybersecurity jobs is there's millions of them open, and there's millions of wannabe candidates. And companies are so, shall we say, cautious when it comes to bringing cybersecurity folks on board, that it might be something more along the lines of demonstrating actual experience in the field than, taking a bunch of courses and getting a bunch of different certifications. Because, I know several people in the cybersecurity field, and, some find getting jobs very, very easy to get. And it's based upon previous experience, as opposed to other folks that are, well educated and well aware, find trouble getting, breaking through that ceiling to get into it. So I think we might have a glut in candidates, but I don't think we're going to see a reduction in the available open positions, because some of these. Some of this criteria is just set so high that folks have trouble getting the jobs, and the jobs remain open for a long time. I see a lot of this on the different forums that talk about cybersecurity jobs, where people are, people that have the credentials are finding it hard to get into a position. And I think there's just so much fear around hiring the right individual that organizations are very slow to respond. But, as each additional attack or intrusion happens, I think they're going to start lowering the bar to get people in there to actively fight, these battles.
I think that partners want to keep in mind two things. One guy told me once, there's never been a shortage of cybersecurity talent. There's a shortage of good cybersecurity talent.
Right.
So he was basically saying you can wind up getting burned by somebody who doesn't really completely appreciate what needs to be done and how it gets done. And for the partners who are thinking about jumping in this space, their word of caution is it's not a business for the faint of heart. It's not like you went in and set something up and then you can remotely monitor it and there might be a problem every once in a while. This is full 24/7, seat of your pants, boring up until the moment something happens, and then all hell breaks loose and it's terror. And you've got to be prepared to roll the troops out at 3 a.m. and have that kind of capability and response. And I don't think the bulk of the channel has that capability.
Not only that, there's significant liability with providing these services, but on the flip side, there's very limited control over the security of an environment when you start adding people to the mix. Sure, you can be a master of the technology, but cybersecurity still comes down to the people being properly trained, the people using the technology, not to click on that malware or that phishing scheme or not to do certain things or to be, very aware of the old, axiom of, loose lips sink ships. So there's a lot of elements in the culture there that solution provider or consultant just has absolutely no control over, and they wind up still having the liability of what can go wrong.
All right, well, we're going to wish everybody a lot of luck at that point. I also want to point out one issue here for me personally. We're getting to the point now where the restrictions are being limited, so I'm looking forward to getting something that looks like a haircut real soon. Frank, of course, doesn't have that problem.
No, but maybe I'll go out and get a shave.
Awesome. All right, guys, back to you in the studio and Alan.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Okay, folks, back here in the TechStrong TV studio. You know, it's been a heck of a great day. I love this show today. We had some really great guests, some really good info. Thanks to Mike Vizard, as usual, excuse me, for doing the channel roundup. Many thanks to Mitchell Ashley for all the work he's doing as, you know, he's founder of Accelerated Strategies Group, and of course to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing partner here. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, June 2nd, for another great lineup of TechStrong TV. I'm going to remind you again, go to TechStrongCon.com, sign up. This is going to be a heck of a show. You don't want to miss this conference. We have 50 great speakers, 12 hours strong. It's TechStrong. But until tomorrow, I hope you remain safe, remain well, remain strong, TechStrong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.